British Quakers have announced a boycott on investment in companies that profit from what they call the military occupation of Palestinian territories by the Israeli government.
Our long history of working for a just peace in Palestine and Israel has opened our eyes to the many injustices and violations of international law arising from the military occupation of Palestine by the Israeli government. With the occupation now in its 51st year and with no end in near sight, we believe we have a moral duty to state publicly that we will not invest in any company profiting from the occupation.
It's the first time a British church has adopted such a ban in the region. Jewish groups have criticised the move, claiming it's a reference to the boycott, divest and sanctions, or BDS movement against Israel. The Board of Deputies of British Jews has called the move appalling and insists it must be reversed. But Quaker leaders claim the decision echoes past protests against apartheid in South Africa and the slave trade. Well, to talk about this, I'm now joined by Levidow from Jews for Boycotting Israeli Goods and Raphi Bloom, co-chair of Northwest Friends of Israel. Thank you both very much for joining us. Les, the Quakers aren't boycotting any other government, so why are they picking on Israel, do you think?
Well, this is the familiar argument about singling out Israel, but Israel singles out itself by receiving $3 billion a year from the U.S. government, by having impunity from international law through the U.S. veto of UN Security Council resolutions, by being exempt from EU rules on human rights, despite its inclusion in the EU framework programs and so on. So Israel singles out itself, and there's every reason for us to respond to the 2005 Palestinian call, which came from them, for us to boycott any organizations involved with the occupation of Palestine.
Raphi, Israel deserves this. There's no question about it, according to Les.
Les has just actually hit the nail on the head in terms of what the boycott movement is about. He talks about boycotting companies that occupy Palestine. And let's be very clear what this is about. The boycott movement is about the destruction of the state of Israel. This is why it's anti-Semitic. Omar Barghouti, the founder of the boycott movement, said very, very clearly that no Jewish state shall ever exist in what is called Palestine. Les himself signed a letter in May 2018 calling for the end of Israel as a Jewish state. We hear constantly at boycott demonstrations, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Make no mistake about it, the boycott movement is not about the rights of Palestinians, it's about the end of Israel.
But can we just talk about Quakers here? Because they, obviously, the main part of their religion is simply they want a better world. They want human rights, they want social justice, they want peace, they want equality. And clearly, they don't see any of that happening there in Palestine at the moment. So
it's interesting that the Quakers say that, because they're singling out Israel. For example, the Palestinian Authority has a pay-to-slay law. It pays Palestinian terrorists who murder Israelis and maim Israelis in terror attacks. It's talking about human rights and peace. It doesn't criticize the Palestinian Authority for that. The Palestinian Authority has a rule that says that any Palestinian that sells land to a Jew in the West Bank, it's punishable by death. Again, they talk about love and peace and equality. They don't protest that. They are singling out the Jewish state, much like Les is, for single attention. They're not talking about the Russian occupation of Crimea. They're not talking about the Moroccan occupation of the Sahara. And again, let's be very clear. The West Bank is disputed territory. It is not occupied territory.
Well, the Palestinians are the only people in the world who, as a people, have asked people elsewhere to boycott the state that has been colonizing them. And the BDS campaign said from the start that the campaign will continue until the Israeli regime ends its apartheid colonial settler regime. That happens to be incompatible with the so-called Jewish character of the state, which really means Jews having special privileges and expelling or oppressing the Palestinians. The idea of a democratic Jewish state is incoherent. It can't be democratic and have Jewish privileges at the same time.
Okay, you're talking about the Palestinian call for a boycott. Omar Barghouti said very clearly, definitely, most definitely, we oppose a Jewish state in any part of Palestine. So let's be very clear. The boycott, divestment and sanctions movement, of which you are a supporter, is seeking the destruction of the Jewish state, the only Jewish state in the world, the only place where Jews have self-determination. Make no mistake
we
about
oppose the racist privileges.
Okay,
it's not.
We oppose the racist privileges for the Jewish
can we get back
population.
to the Quakers
Yes,
being accused
yes.
of being anti-Semitic over this?
Well, it's an anti-racist approach to
world.
Palestine in support of Palestinian rights. And Zionist organizations have no moral authority whatsoever.
Well, here we
to
have a church.
criticize.
Is it really credible, though, that Raphi, a church would be discriminating against another race or religion?
Yeah, but
Well, let's hear what Raphi says about that.
That question.
Well, yeah, here we have a church discriminating against another race and religion. Is that really what Quakers are up to here? They're concerned about what is happening in terms of human rights.
Well, let's be clear about the Quakers. The Quakers are part of the cessationist movement, which believes that Christianity surpassed the Jews as the chosen people, and the Jews lost their right as God's children, if you will, if you're talking about it in a religious context. But the fact is that they are joining the boycott, divestment and sanctions movement that seeks the destruction of the state of Israel. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. That is what the boycott, divestment and sanctions movement state. Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East. 20% of its citizens, who are Arab Israelis, have full votes, full rights.
They are treated as second-class citizens.
They are not
in many
treated as
areas of life, in housing, in building permits, in...
Okay, carry on, let's... Yeah.
Yes, and...
Sorry.
Israel cannot be a democratic and Jewish state at the same time by giving special privileges to the Jewish population through the Jewish National Fund, which has a monopoly on land, through the law of return, which privileges Jews from anywhere in the world against the Palestinians.
We hear these arguments all the time, but let's talk about the Quakers again. Do you think really what they're doing, speaking out, is it really going to make much of an impact? Because apparently many Quaker businessmen haven't even got any investments in Israel.
Well, it sets a crucial example for all other organizations to do likewise, to divest from all companies complicit in the occupation. And I'd like to add, the Zionist organizations have no moral authority to criticize the Quakers. They played a leading role in helping to rescue Jews from Nazi Germany through the Kindertransport, at the same time as the German Zionist Federation signed a pact with Nazi Germany for the transfer of some German Jews in return for breaking the anti-Nazi boycott.
Okay, let's hear from Raphi now. Let's hear from Raphi.
Sorry. Now you're getting into the realms of anti-Semitism and Ken Livingstone and the Zionists and the Nazis, and that is beyond the pale. And that is symptomatic of the type of people like Les who support the boycott, divestment and sanctions movement.
Explain why he's being anti-Semitic there. Just get to the point very quickly.
How is it anti-Semitic?
How is he being anti-Semitic?
To tell historical truths. How is that anti-Semitic? Inconvenient truths for your position.
Can I answer the question, please? You've asked me to. Please let me answer the question. To go back to the Quakers. Yes. Indeed, the Quakers were instrumental in rescuing Jews back in the Second World War. That is without doubt. But one of the things the Quakers said, for example, is that they will boycott companies that are involved in the maintenance and the building of Israel's security barrier. Let me remind you that between 2002 and 2006, over 800 Israelis were murdered, blown up in buses and in cafes by terrorists coming in from the West Bank into Israel. Thousands more were maimed. That security fence has saved thousands of Israeli lives, both Jewish and Arab Israeli lives. So the Quakers now to be turning around and saying, we're going to boycott a company that maintains a fence that saves the lives of men, women and children, innocent men, women and children, shows that really they have no understanding of the situation. And in fact, the only way to solve the situation with Israel and the Palestinians is through dialogue.
We call it the separation wall because its main purpose...
You have no understanding of the situation, so come back on that one.
It's the separation wall. Its main purpose is to extend the colonization project.
And again, they are singling out the Jewish state. They're not focusing on any other states in the world. China occupies Tibet. Where's their boycott of Chinese goods?
Well, where's the call for boycott from the Chinese people? There isn't any. Palestine is the only place in the world where the whole people, all their relevant organizations, have called on the world to boycott the state that is oppressing and colonizing them.
And that's actually a lie, because I have been to the West Bank. I have met with Palestinians who say they oppose the boycott movement. The boycott movement harms them directly, and they do not support the boycott movement. So that is a lie that is peddled to say that all Palestinians support the boycott movement. That is not true.
All the relevant organizations support it. They signed the call in 2005.
People's livelihoods at stake as a result of this, Liz?
Well, it's the colonization of Palestine which is undermining their livelihoods, and the only way out is to end the colonization project and the special privileges for Jews, especially through the Jewish National Fund.
OK, we'll just have to leave it there. Thank you both very much. A very interesting, lively debate. Les and Raphi, thank you very much for your time. Good to hear.